Hello, my friends. It is Sleepy Reader, aka Damien, and this is the return of the comic book countdown. My comic book thoughts, super subjective, based on my reading, how I felt when I was reading the comics, what I responded to and what I didn't. Not a thorough review or anything like that. Just my feelings. So I'm trying to get back into new comics. And so I have a stack of 8 comics here that really didn't come out this past week. Maybe a few of them came out this past week. And I'm filming this on a Wednesday, so some even more new ones are coming out, but fairly new in the past month or so. Um, to get me back going, to get my pull list going and stuff, I'm exploring what's going on in the new books. But before I go much further, I wanted to say happy 6th anniversary to Comics with Bueller. He told me this is hippie coffee, so I'm going to be a hippie and have some Starbucks Nitro cold brew. I love this stuff. I guess I'm a hippie. And also, I showed it on a live stream, but I wanted to be sure to show this fantastic cover that Namen, aka a, co- a comic bookworm, did for me as part of the Comics Curing Cancer fundraiser. So I bid on this sight unseen because it was not drawn yet. And Namen uh, did twice as much as he needed to do. He did this fantastic full spread illustration with the Crypt Keeper there from Creepshow, a fun postal box thing, an evil Kool-Aid guy, and the regular Kool-Aid guy looking a little concerned. Oops. And even the Hawaiian Punch guy. And the worm. This is a Namen's symbol from one of the more modern versions of Mr. Mind, the worm from Shazam. So fantastic job, Namen. Really looks good. One of a kind. I am so happy and proud to have this. Thank you very much, Namen. So, yeah, it was tough getting into these books, and color was also a big problem. Um, my number 8 book, lowest on here, and the one I really did not enjoy reading very much, but I should have, was Gone. And I picked this up. I didn't even notice it was issue 2. It doesn't say on the front cover. So I thought I was getting an issue 1. It only says issue 2 on the back cover. So it did have it did start in a deficit, sort of, because I didn't know what was going on, although I could sort of figure it out as things went on, most of it. But it was just choppy. It just felt like it was missing narrative parts that would connect everything, and things seemed to just happen. It was very disappointing. Uh, I will go a little more in depth and show some of the art inside. So I'm going to do my usual thing where I do a quick countdown, and then for people who don't mind being spoiled of stuff that might be inside, and a few more comments. But my all of a lot of science fiction in or science in comics is really bad, and one of the big concepts in here is that people go out on a starship and they get to have a big adventure and come back to Earth, and very little time has passed. And that is the reverse of how time dilation works. If you go on a spaceship close to the speed of light, very little time will pass for you, and you come back to Earth and hundreds of years will have passed. So the whole concept here is wrong. This is supposed to be a grown-up comic. It's a very simple, basic, one of the first things you learn when they talk about Einstein's theories about the speed of light and stuff. So basic, and they got it wrong. Some cool art in here, but um, very, very disappointing, because I like the idea of a writer artist, and I wish Jock could have done that, but apparently he can't, or he's in too much of a rush, or there was no editor pushing him. Another disappointment, because I had very high expectations also, was for Underheist. I was very excited to see a new comic by the Laphams in color seemed like a good idea, but maybe it wasn't. Uh, I don't know. It just wasn't very interesting, and it didn't seem to have anything special going on. Wasn't bad. The only one that I really kind of was like, what did I just read, was Gone by Jock. So I put this at number 7. Another thing I had high expectations for and came out a little lower is in my number 6 spot, The One Hand. Apparently, this goes along with a comic that's going to come out soon called The Six Fingers. And you can sort of see that coming by the end of this comic. There's a lot of cool art. The art reminded me a bit of, now I can't remember his name. The guy who does all the work with Jeff Lemire, Sorrentino. The art reminded me of Sorrentino. It's by Lawrence Campbell. The coloring by Lee Loughridge is beautiful. I just, again, didn't care very much. I thought that there'd be something more interesting because it's coming from Ram V. It's supposed to take place in the year, let's see, where do they say that? Somewhere they say the year 2873, but almost nothing. That's like 800 years from now, 850 years from now, and almost nothing was different from now. So anyway, I don't know. Maybe it'll be revealed later why we're 800 years in the future. It was fun. It's interesting. I think I'll pick up the next issue, and maybe I'll try the Six Fingers, or the Hand with Six Fingers, or whatever it's called. But I'm not super excited. And then I picked up Pine and Merrimack, issues 1 and 2. And this, yeah, I enjoyed this. There was a lot of cliched stuff in it. It just was paced weirdly. Like, it's almost like they didn't want to hook you into the story. They save anything in the story that might be a hook for the middle of the first issue, maybe. So yeah, it's kind of a fun detective novel. I'll talk about it more in the spoilery section. But anyway, so this came in at number 5. Again, it's sort of, in a way, maybe I should have ranked the One Hand. I'm more likely to pick up more issues than Pine and Merrimack. I can kind of see where it's going. But at the time, I enjoyed reading it more, maybe because I wasn't disappointed compared to the One Hand. So there's the weirdness of my way of doing these. Now, the last 4 were all ones I really enjoyed. So it was harder to rank them, harder to figure out what order to rank them in for a couple of reasons. Crashdown, which is by YouTubers Comic Tom and Fire Guy Ryan, with art from Ben Templesmith, a established professional. And this was a cool science fiction story, and I think it was well thought out. There were aspects of the art that were a bit confusing. It might have been ranked higher for me, but the art maybe wasn't the best match for the story, but it was well written, and there's nothing wrong with the art, and I'll definitely want to follow this. I think this is supposed to be 6 issues. Definitely want to follow this to the end, I think, unless it takes a dive somewhere along the way. But really enjoying this. Kind of science fiction horror with the whole idea of the generation ship, which is kind of an interesting twist. Science fiction horror, of course, is a classic genre or subgenre that I enjoy a lot. But anyway, I think they're doing a good job there. And then a comic I loved, but there wasn't enough of it. I put it number 3, Acid Chimp versus Business Dog. And there really wasn't much Acid Chimp versus Business Dog. It was all build up to it, and then it ended just like that. So if it had gone on a little longer, this would have been my number 1 book. Coloring was fantastic in here, at least in terms of the storytelling. So that helped a lot too. But great art, funny storytelling. It needed to be a 2-issue. I think in a sense it needed to be a 2-issue mini arc. Ahoy seems to be back after sort of fading a bit. but because I picked up another comic of theirs, but I decided it was a little bit older, and it was the return of the Captain Ginger. And I noticed that because when I was last buying Ahoy Comics, they were $4.99. They had raised their prices, and now they're back to $3.99. So that's good news. Um, if you've read Billionaire Island and or one of my favorite comics of the last, I guess, 2022, My Bad, then you'll really love this. And if you haven't read My Bad, I recommend getting that in trade. I love the two My Bad arcs that they did were hilarious. Okay, and then here's the most controversial in my brain. Beware of the Planet of the Apes. Excellent story. This, unlike the other Marvel Planet of the Apes, which I think are more related to the modern movies, this is a prequel to the very first Planet of the Apes movie, uh, involving Zira and what was his husband or her fiance's name? Um, Zira and her fiance and her nephew, and Gaius Zaius shows up, and Nova's in here. I think it's Nova. So excellent story. I would not have picked this up. I didn't even know it existed except when I was at MegaCon. Comics with Bueller was hosting a panel with Mark Guggenheim, and it was an excellent panel. Mark Guggenheim seemed really cool, and he mentioned working on this. So I got all excited and went out and found a copy. In fact, this may have helped me get um, back into the comic book store because this was the one I was really looking for. Well, this and Conan. So I put this at number 2. It would have been number 1, but the coloring was atrocious. It pretty much made the art disappear almost. I'll show you more when I flip the camera around. And there was a digital code in here, and I don't normally do it, but I went ahead and got the digital version from this, and the colors look great digitally on my screen of my iPad. But here's the thing. Most comics are still bought physically, either in floppies or in trades. I think they say only about 15% of sales in general come from digital. And I'm not sure whether they'll have this on the Marvel Unlimited app when it becomes free. But the color is so bad in the print version. Anyway, it just seems like it should be the editor's jobs to know what works and what doesn't. Instead, they must have been impressed on the screen by the wonderful coloring job and never thought about what it would look like in print. So my number 1 comic, it might have been number 2, it was close. It had fantastic coloring. Conan the Barbarian, number 7. The story is very good. I think the reason it would have been number 2 is because, again, expectations. I kind of want Conan stories still to be a little more like they were in the 70s. This is kind of stretched out. And at the same time that it's stretched out, there's a feeling that some details are glossed over that would not have been in an older, shorter story, if that makes sense. But there was also a lot of great stuff, great action, fantastic art. The color really worked, really did its job to enhance the art. So the Titan Conan comic remains a favorite, and I just hope they stick with paying, getting the really good artists and the really good colorists, paying attention to what it looks like on the page. Jim Zub clearly has kind of each arc is part of a longer arc, and that irritates me a little. Again, I want the more. I think it gets in the way of making the stories kind of perfect. Uh, because it's serving things are serving a larger purpose and are not fully wrapped up. I felt in the first arc there were some threads that really should have been dealt with that were not, and that made that ultimately a little less satisfying than it could have been. But anyway, Conan came in at number 1. So the big puzzle for me is, do I continue to get Beware Planet of the Apes physically? Because I'm loving this. I love Planet of the Apes, the original Planet of the Apes. I haven't even seen the new movies. Um, I don't know why. Maybe I just don't want to tarnish my memories of Planet of the Apes, such as they are. Of course, it's very wrapped up in nostalgia. When the first movie came out, I was 7 years old. I wasn't allowed to go see it, but I heard all about it. I remember ads on the radio for it that stirred up my imagination. And then some of the later movies, I got to see them, and then they were all on TV. Uh, anyway, so it's a huge part of it's like for people younger than me, this might be what Star Wars is to them, Planet of the Apes is to me, in a way. Um, so I will turn the camera around and we'll take a look inside some of these comics. So let's take a look inside of Gone by Jock. I mean, I have to admire him for doing the writing and the drawing, and he even was involved in the colors. And there is some cool visuals in here. And another cool thing is, which, because this was the second issue, it took me a while to realize these people are kind of camped out inside the spaceship. I don't know if they were trapped in there by someone or got in there on purpose. There's some kind of group called the Sabs. I don't know if that's like the class that they are. And there's some action and some goal that they're after. They want to get to the crew quarters. I thought at first just to make the ship turn around so that they could get back to Earth before they spent 25 or 30 years of their lifetimes on this ship. Because as I mentioned, they got the idea of time dilation reversed in this book. So yeah, it's nice art, nice coloring. As always for me, sometimes a little too dark, but not too bad. It's just the connections of like what happened. And we have two characters who I guess, that's one guy and that's the other. But I think I kept getting them a little confused. But they're just what they are up to and what their motivations were probably would be more clear to me if I'd read the first issue. But still, there's just sort of these little jumps the story takes that make it not work. And they're in the middle of some kind of crisis, and then she goes and takes a nap. And then the crisis continues. It just seemed kind of weird to me. It's too bad. I mean, with a little bit of more work, I think this could be a really cool story. But the writer has to not take the audience for granted quite so much. The writer being the artist here. Or not take for granted that his art is telling the whole story. At least he doesn't have the problem of putting in too much writing, as some artists suddenly turned writers do. But I don't know. There's just too much missing. So anyway, maybe maybe I'm treating it unfairly and I should read the first issue. Maybe that would make a difference. Distillery is kind of weird too, because their big selling point was they were going to have a digital marketplace where you could only buy a digital copy of these comics for 1 month. But I haven't heard anything more about that. And and they're oversized. They're much bigger than the others. They're like the Black Label books at DC. So I don't fully understand the marketing of Distillery. What they need is a big hit, and maybe one of their comics is a big hit, and I just don't know about it, to really get people interested in all their books, I would think. So then I put Under Heist at number 7. This is a nice looking cover, and David Lapham's artwork we usually see in black and white in Stray Bullets, and this seems a bit like a Stray Bullets story, I guess, but it just seems kind of plain and vanilla, which is funny with all the color, about people who are kind of in a desperate kind of people who find out about someone else's heist and underneath a bank, I guess they're drilling from underneath, and then they plan to steal from the thieves, and then of course things start to go wrong. I don't know, maybe because I've enjoyed other David Lapham books, I will try another issue. I'm not sure. I can't decide. A lot of books that I hear that I can't decide if I'm going to continue with them. Oh, okay. Let's see in proper order. So this Ram V, Lawrence Campbell, Lee Lowridge. Lee Lowridge again. I think he was the colorist on Gone. Together, even the cover has kind of that Sorrentino kind of look. But so it's visually very pleasing. But we have this future 600 years from now, 650 years from now. No, 750 years from now, I believe. Or is it? No, 850 years from now. Where everything looks pretty much like now. Regular cars, maybe even cars from the 70s. I don't know. Maybe it's an alternate universe. But why set this 750 years in the future? I'm not sure. It's very strange, actually, now that I think about it. Look at that. We've got typewriters, Venetian blinds, old-fashioned police files. So it's kind of interesting, I guess. Oh, those colors are beautiful. I might pick it up for the art. The thing is, I think when I left comics, when I left New Comics for a year plus, there were certain comics that got me super excited about comics, like Shaolin Cowboy and what was the name of it? The J.H. Williams book, and some other books like that, that were incredible works of art, I guess. And nothing is striking me that way yet. Of course, this is only 1 week's worth. The Kyle Starks usually does humorous books, if I'm remembering the right person. I've not heard of Fran Gallen before, although their style looks very familiar to me. Like there's other artists who do this. It's very similar style. And the colors, at least, they don't have the problem of making it unclear what's going on or being too dark, but somehow they just don't appeal to me a whole lot. They almost make the art have less impact, if that makes sense. Like you're seeing stills from a animation rather than you're in the moment somehow. You're viewing it through a window. And the plot is essentially evil politicians who are kidnapping young girls, and they're either sacrificing them or doing something sexual with them. And I don't know, in the current political climate here in the US, that also feels like kind of a dicey, it's both kind of a cliche, silly conspiracy theory kind of idea, but also one that has led to, some real acts of violence and such in our current world, where people believe such things about regular politicians. So Crashdown, like I said, I liked this a lot. I liked the story. I like parts of the art, and I think Ben Temple-Smith must have done everything. So maybe I don't know if he painted this physically or painted it digitally. There are moments where I misinterpreted what was going on in the art. I thought there were 2 astronauts, and then we have this big disaster where they're attacked by something giant with tentacles, and then it becomes clear there's a whole lot of astronauts, and I think they're all but one killed, or maybe they are all killed. And then we flash back to the story of this, Earth is doomed, and people are doing a generation ship to another world. It's sort of a desperation act. They don't know everything about it. Yeah, so it's a good sci-fi story. The art just has this odd feeling. I wonder what it looks like digitally, actually. It kind of is glowy artwork, if you know what I mean. I guess they use a lot of white lines where another artist might use black lines. And then I think art-wise, I liked Acid Chimp and Business Dog most. It was just more basic, a basic comic book art. I guess the coloring is not the most beautiful in the world, but it helped tell the story and make it clear in every picture what was going on. And so just from a comic book storytelling thing, I mean, you can kind of get the picture just by looking at the pictures, which was the old way, right? That they used to talk about comics. You should be able to read the pictures. And that's a key to comic books, right? That you are reading the words and you are reading the pictures, and that's why it's so effective that you've got both. So basically, the plot is someone thinks that they can take down the billionaire business dog, whose choices between stocks controls the modern economy. They can take him down by sending him Acid Chimp as a pet. But they don't. They just begin to develop it and then it's over. So that's the downside of it. But so we have a two-part story, one told by the Acid Chimp team and one told by the Business Dog team of creators, and both look really good. And both are colored by Chris Chuckery, and so yeah, that's really good. So here comes the number two, what could have been number one choice if it weren't for the coloring. So here a clever thing is they include a few panels and pages from the original Marvel Planet of the Apes comic as kind of an introduction into it. And then here's the modern art. And this color, I really liked it. It looks a bit modified from the original anyway. But then we get into this, and suddenly we're in the gloom. I mean, it's very well drawn, and this will look better on your screen than it does just on my piece of paper. And especially, if you're not in daylight when you're reading this, a lot of the art gets lost in there. But this artist is very good. Like I said, it was Guggenheim. Who is the artist? Where is the credits? Can't find the credits. They're coming. There. Alvaro Lopez does an excellent job. But Alex Guimarães, as the colorist, really let us down. But, a nice map there. But I think it's actually the fault of editorial. The editors probably looked at the digital version of this and gave it a thumbs up. And this has a digital code. I might have mentioned that, and so I downloaded it and looked at it digitally. So there's the same page. The editor probably looked at this and said, "Wow, great job coloring, Alvaro." No, it's not Alvarez, but whoever it is. But they did not either have the expertise or take a check to see what this stuff would look like, printed out on the kind of paper they use. And so much of the artwork's gone. Maybe other people, your average comic book buyer, isn't as obsessed about coloring that ruins things as I am. But they might come away with the impression that the art wasn't that good in this comic, even though it really was. And here, again, I'm thinking about how an editor may look at this panel on their large computer screen when the colorist turns it in and say, "Look how beautiful that is." But then you look at the actual panel, and most of it is lost. Like, say that apple. The apple has all kinds of, delicate colors and highlights in it. That doesn't show up on the page. Even though I've zoomed it into the screen, maybe it begins to show up. But when I have it in front of me, much of this detail is just lost. And so maybe colorists are just coloring to impress editors digitally. But so anyway, there's another example. Anyway, I enjoyed the comic book more when I read the digital version, but I because I like Planet of the Apes so much, I want to have the physical copy. And so there's like a night. Some of these scenes weren't even nighttime scenes, like that one I was showing you. This one here, that is daytime. That is supposed to be daytime, and that's supposed to be nighttime. But I think the eye just bounces off of a lot of this stuff, and so all the work the line artist has done is lost. Okay, so my number one had great coloring, good line work, but I think it could have been destroyed by a colorist who did what happened in the Planet of the Apes. So this is the third part of the story, with Conan kind of encountering a version of the same power he encountered in the first arc, and it emotionally ties into his experiences with Belit, his true love, who is dead at this point, but we get flashbacks to her. Ooh, that's gruesome. Chris from Chaos and Comics mentioned to me that he thought this series was living up to what people thought they wanted when they said, the European Conan was going to be more brutal and more sexual. This is more brutal and more sexual than those European Conan comics, I think. Let's see. There was a cool... most of this takes place at nighttime, but you don't need to obscure the artwork. But yeah, it's brutal. People's legs get chopped off. The swords in the Hyborian Age were exceptionally sharp to hack right through two legs. Anyway, cool comic book. I probably will never get my desire for them to do more condensed stories. But as far as the more stretched out modern stories, this is about as good as it gets. Okay, see you next time.